Welcome, brothers. Welcome to Awaken the Sleeping Lions, and a special warm welcome to you, my dear friend, Deus.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun. Happy to be chatting with you finally.
Yes, I always love our conversations. We end up going down these incredible threads and vortexes, and yeah, I never know where our conversation and dialogue is going to go, and I'm super excited to drop in today with the topic that you chose, which is really how to come into deeper connection with self and others, and how to acknowledge the emotions that have been denied so that one can resolve that and the heart can be open again, and to be able to soften into the pain that hasn't been felt so it can be healed, so we can come into loving contact with others, resolving unconscious traumas and pain that has been hidden in those dark, elusive, secret places.
Those dark, secret spaces. Nice, ominous segue.
Yeah, so just before we dive into the topic and why you chose that, I would love to hear an introduction from you as to what you're up to, and I'll let you stack on my perception of you. I've known you for just over a year now, properly, and what I see in front of me is a man who is dedicated to mastery. And you have mastered many modalities, including breathwork, shamanism. You've been a monk. You've been with the Native Americans of this sacred land and doing this Sundance, and you are a facilitator of plant medicine as well, and an incredible poet and lyricist. So I know spoken word is your thing, and language is always at the forefront. The intelligence and the preciseness that you create within language, and that's my perception of you, which makes you an incredibly grounded master.
Well, thank you for that very generous perception. I would not claim to be a master in any of the things that I'm engaged in, but I definitely have some experience and some knowledge in those spaces, but very much a student in all of those territories that you're talking about. I'm an accelerated evolution coach, so that means many things, but I have a masterclass for men, a self-mastery program for men. As you mentioned, I'm a plant medicine facilitator, a breathwork practitioner, and a transformational artist. So I'm certified in various modalities, but I've kind of synthesized those into a comprehensive transformation facilitation style. So the way that I frame it is the three major spiritual pillars that influence my perception and approach to things are, first, the path of Kriya Yoga, through Paramahansa Yogananda. So this is an ancient yogic science of energy control and meditation, combined with the more shamanic realms of plant medicine and the indigenous traditions that I've been exposed to and have been a support of, mostly the Blackfoot tradition down in southern Alberta. So those three pillars kind of inform my perspective and approach to any type of trauma-based or transformational facilitation.
Yeah, and yeah, I just want to acknowledge your commitment and dedication to discovering what lurks in every hidden corner, so that you can be a more complete man and facilitator, so that you can support others through whatever traumas that they are suffering from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ongoing.
Yeah, the evolution never ends.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dive into the topic and why you chose that, Deus. Why did you decide to bring that today?
Well, that came about from you asking the question, what is my message? And my response was something akin to, I don't really have a specific message. My whole approach to engaging with anyone, in particular those that I'm in service to formally, is to make genuine contact with them as a person, because everybody needs different things. Everybody has a different constitution. They have different strengths, different challenges. But one of the things that all of us have in common is resolving the distortions within our psycho-emotional systems so that we can open back to contact with life as a whole. And that happens in relationship. It doesn't happen as this isolated thing over here in the corner. That healing really takes place in relationship to deeper aspects of ourselves, with each other, with the planet. And that's something that all of us have in common. So it just makes sense for that to be a starting point for a conversation around, what it means to really come alive, especially right now in our world that's going through so much challenge and upset and uncertainty and chaos and confusion. It's really quite simple, even though it's not easy to come back into heart connection with each other in the midst of all of these various conflicts that are showing up in people's lives.
Yeah, the simplicity is the key for sure. Yet there are these human complexities in the way, and I know I've certainly been deconstructing them over the last couple of years, and it feels like from our recent conversations we've been on a similar trajectory. Shining the light into that dark secret cave to really coax out whatever's been hiding in there.
If I can just jump in there for a second, just to reframe that a little bit, one of the things that is important to realize in any kind of shadow work or transformational work is that the human complexities are not actually in the way. Those are the way. The complexities that each person is bringing to a circumstance, their triggers, their traumas, their wounds, their fears, those are actually the catalysts for transformation for that particular person, because those are the signposts towards where there is painful past programming, and the resolution of that actually leads to the evolution of the person. So there is no obstacle. Those are actually the catalysts for transformation, and coming into contact with those things is the very thing that instigates healing on the deepest levels. So when we can open up to that as a concept, that there's nothing we actually need to fight against, but we do need to lean into those things with greater skill and capacity and support, that is what is going to bring us what we're seeking, which is a greater sense of wholeness. And it's accessible to everybody. Mm-hmm. But as you're saying, it's unique to each person. So it's important to get to know ourselves and get to know each other as unique individuals to see where we can best support each other and come back into contact.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. And it's that wholeness that allows us to come into contact, right? Because I mean, I can share firsthand my struggle with looking at those shadow aspects of myself. There's always been an internal turmoil or struggle or fight going on. It's like, no, I cannot acknowledge you. I will not accept you. I will not see you. And sometimes that comes across as I need to heal you. I need to disappear you. You need to be gone. Mm-hmm. And that creates this internal dissonance and dis-ease in the body.
Yeah, it creates a schism between who you are in a moment and who you want to be, and it vilifies some aspect of yourself, which is one of the things that actually perpetuates painful past programming. It's trying to push away certain feelings or certain experiences, and it's trying to cling on to other aspects of who we are. And that polarization is what creates the perpetuation of suffering. So it's An easy way to frame this, and I share this with a lot of people that I work with who come into plant medicine ceremonies in particular. A lot of people come into those spaces looking for some kind of magic pill, some kind of holy moment that will remove all of the things that have been creating suffering in their lives, and they just magically emerge out the other side, a whole and complete being with permanent contact with God consciousness, where all of the traumas have just evaporated into thin air. And
I'm healed.
Yeah, exactly. Come take away all of my pain so that I can be whole again. And that's not the purpose, and that's not the point. That's not how medicines work. That's not how transformational work unfolds. And it doesn't even matter if it's in plant medicine ceremonies. This is true in any kind of shadow work or breath work, body-centered psychotherapy, traditional psychotherapy. But one of the helpful things to frame that is an understanding of trauma and what trauma is. A lot of people use the term trauma without actually understanding what it is that they're talking about. Every person is carrying trauma in some way, shape, or form. The trauma is not the thing that happened to us. The trauma is what we hold on to from that experience, what hasn't been processed from that experience. And to understand this, one of the helpful frames is to go back into childhood and to acknowledge that throughout our upbringing, we are trained. We are trained that if we feel and express certain things, if we behave in certain ways, we're punished. It leads to pain, it leads to rejection, it leads to the withdrawal of love. And then if we feel and express other things, if we behave in other ways, then we're rewarded. We are praised and acknowledged, and we receive love. And to a child, this is no small matter. This is the difference between life and death to the nervous system of a child. And when we're going through intense experiences, that activates the nervous system into an intense fight or flight response. And if there's no way to overcome that threat, then the system goes into a shutdown response or a freeze response. And that energy, that emotional experience, is basically locked in the system because it's too intense to be processed at that time. So it's literally pushed down into the recesses of the psyche. It's stored in the body and it's held perpetually. And this process of resolving that wound reverses the trajectory of the nervous system, where these frozen areas of energy and emotion start to thaw, and then they reverse their flow. It moves back into the nervous system and into the emotions and into awareness, into experience in its original intensity, which feels inherently overwhelming and threatening. Those are the qualities of unprocessed emotion or trauma rising up to the surface to be discharged. It doesn't just evaporate, it passes through the system. It's a memory. It's a psycho-emotional memory that is rising up, and it feels overwhelming. But that's what actually gives us the opportunity to renegotiate our relationship with that energy, to feel it fully in a safe and supportive environment, so that it can be integrated, that it can be processed, and it can be discharged. So it actually leads us into intensity as an initial step. And rather than trying to get rid of it or change it or control it in some way, by actually relaxing into that experience and to be held through that, that's what actually allows the experience to be integrated and resolved within the system. So oftentimes people go into experiences with this, this magic pill idea in their mind, and it unfolds in the opposite way than what they were expecting. It actually aggravates the thing that they were trying to get away from. And they're like, what is going on? I wanted peace. Why am I feeling grief and confusion and anger and upset? And it's because that is the process of healing whatever it is that's unresolved in the system. It gets activated in its full intensity so that it can be felt and then discharged out of the nervous system. And that leads to resolution, not from rejection, but from full acceptance and allowance of all feelings without being dependent upon any type of enforced, solidified regulatory process it's an allowance, and that increases your capacity for intensity and opens you back up again in areas that have been shut down. So it's a very different process from what a lot of people have in their minds. They're thinking, oh, to resolve trauma, I need to, stop thinking negative thoughts and be positive and remove all of the triggers so that I'm not feeling bad or upset or angry. When the process itself is actually, no, you actually have to go into those things. You have to resolve your relationship to those feelings. And that will lead you to your innate state of wholeness that was broken when you first experienced that, which created a schism in your being and had you separate yourself from aspects of reality, aspects of identity, aspects of feeling.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's so profound for the listeners and all you men out there, really to get this communication, because many men suffer from depression and anxiety, frustration, exhaustion, burnout, and really when we look at all of those, it's what Deus is talking about. It's just emotions that want to be acknowledged, or past traumas that have come from various events in our lives that just keep being activated over and over again within our lives, and they just want to be fully expressed. Yet what we tend to do is we tend to mask them or hide them or deny them space inside of us with the use of addictions, for example, instead of being that traumatized deer that's just been chased by the lion that goes behind the bush when it's finally escaped and just shakes uncontrollably for 10, 15, 30 minutes, and then it's right as rain again. So it's an incredible, powerful access to that relationship with the whole self, right?
Which can be challenging to do it is challenging to do, especially in a world that has very little space for the full intensity of emotional expression.
Right.
Like the ways that we've learned to cope, the way that we've learned to behave in the world is not the enemy. That is a very intelligent response to the system so that it can continue functioning in an efficient way within society. And so a big part of the question right now for a lot of people is, where can I go?
Right.
Where all of my feelings and expressions are allowed, not just allowed, but held and even celebrated. Like, where can I go to feel loved, regardless of how I am feeling or what I am expressing? Do those spaces exist? And as a culture, this ties back into why I propose this as a topic of discussion. This is the most important thing from my perspective as we seek to evolve as individuals, but also as a collective, is to learn how to be present with the full spectrum of the human experience with each other.
Yeah. Being able to hold space for each other within that full spectrum, it creates that loving connection that we truly desire. I think as men, we really want to have that deep trust in those around us, and when we allow others to hold space for us, we can certainly access that. And I know we've done that for each other a number of times in our high vibe brotherhood here in North Vancouver. And I was especially privileged to have all of you hold space for me in a very, very vulnerable moment where I really got how depression had been present in a large part of my life. And it was a real blind spot. And just being able to be held by other men in that safe container, and literally have all of you holding space for me, like holding me from behind, touching me, encouraging me to breathe, which just unlocked the emotion. It's very hard for tears to come through my eyeballs, but in that moment, with that support and that surrender, it happened, and it was the most incredible release. And yeah, it's giving me tingles now recalling that moment. I just felt so loved and supported, and I couldn't have got there on my own. That's the truth. And to be honest, through that process, the depression very quickly evaporated. Literally within a week or two after that process, and allowing myself to be seen and allowing myself to be incredibly messy and cry in front of other men. It was incredibly, I'm hesitant to say the word healing, but it was healing in a way that it allowed me to integrate that shadow side of myself that I denied most of my life.
Yeah, men's groups are incredibly important containers for that reason, to come together and relearn how to be with other men in a safe, supportive, vulnerable way that offers loving support, but also challenge when necessary, but building that level of trust with men so that the layers of defense can start to soften and dissolve, and what's been hiding under the surface can actually come up.
And that really heals the collective as well. It gives the collective permission to be vulnerable, to be messy, to be authentic. And on that note, what do you feel has supported you over your journey to really unlock a more comprehensive and whole relationship with yourself and your shadows?
There's been a lot of different things, but I'll tell a story of one of the most significant. This is a transition point for me, and maybe just to preface it a little bit, I have a background in Kriya Yoga, as I was mentioning before, which is a very interiorized practice. So if something shows up through a trigger or in a relationship with somebody, the process is to go inside in deep meditation to offer that at the feet of the divine and to transmute it internally. It's very much removed from relationship with other people. And I immersed myself in that for many years, many hours of meditation, and had developed that as a practice, but was continuously finding that I was incredibly lonely, periodically depressed, and not really sure how to engage in the world. I didn't want to speak about the things that I cared most about because they were internal, very hard to find words for. And I didn't care about any of the superficial things. So that didn't leave a lot of middle ground to relate to other people. So I really struggled to be a part of the world and was searching for quite a few years. I would do seasonal work to make money, and then I would travel, taking different programs and workshops and visiting family and all of these things. And I was trying to find how to bridge this gap between my internal life, which is so rich and satisfying, and this external world, so that I could be in relationship and not be alone. This is a big thing, how to not be alone in a meaningful way. And I ended up stumbling across this program called Transformative Art, which really changed the whole direction of my life. So this was a program called Creativity and Consciousness by one of my teachers, Dana Lynn Anderson, who's based out of Laurelwood, Oregon, and also Assisi, Italy. And she founded the Awakening Arts Academy. And she has a PhD in consciousness studies from Johns Hopkins University, which I had no idea you could get a PhD in up until that point. So a very well-educated woman. And she was also practicing Kriya Yoga for decades. And she was also an incredibly skilled artist. And she had combined these into what she calls transformative art. And the whole process for this was about tuning in deeply to what you were feeling in any given moment, regardless of what the content was. Right? So you start with physical sensation, and then you allow the emotion of that sensation to rise up to the surface. And for a period of time, you surrender yourself over to that feeling. You allow that feeling to take control of your system and all of its expressions. And then you channel that out into some sort of artistic expression through movement or through sound or through painting, through sculpting, through language, whatever it is. But the main point of consideration here is that you are not deliberately controlling the expression. You're allowing the feeling itself to guide all movements and expressions without inhibiting or filtering it in any way. So this is accomplishing two things. One, it's resensitizing what I call your inner landscape. And two, it's dissolving the fears and the inhibitions and the blockages around the expression of that, essentially creating a bridge between your inner world and your outer expression. And one of the benefits of doing this through an artistic medium is that it can be done in a really playful, really focused way. And you can share in that experience with a group of people, and that creates a connection with everybody involved. And so if my feeling was coming out through paint, there's an objective representation of a living energy inside of me through color and through image. And then I can share that with other people, and they can connect to me by connecting to that piece of art, and they can share how it makes them feel, how it impacts them. And in that way, we're connected. Something that had been intensely personal has now been shared and created a connection point between myself and between others. And that was the bridge that I was looking for a very long time. It reconciled the schism between my inner world and my outer world, and created an opportunity for deeper expression, knowing that whatever it was that I was expressing was not defining who I am or what I am. It's simply expressing a living energy that I am in contact with in a moment. And then through that, it became a practice, a daily practice of going into these spaces, of coming into deep connection with what I'm feeling and allowing that time and space to express itself, which led me to come to understand myself more fully. It opened up my capacity to express both verbally and through my body and through sounds, through all the different ways that we express ourselves, and started deepening the relationships that I had in my life.
Wow. I love the description of that process, this unfiltered release of emotion and an expression in the physical, the somatic, the sonic expression that is resulting in this material art piece. I mean, you could just go completely wild. And wow, I can only imagine what those art pieces looked like. Just splattered with emotion.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and it's not about the finished product. Like, you're not trying to generate, a refined piece of art through this. And this was a big part of the process of taking the emphasis off of the finished product and putting it on the process itself of feeling and expressing. And inevitably, people would confront some sort of blockage in that area, like oftentimes when people would come in for a weekend workshop or something, every now and then somebody would share something like, oh, I can't move or I can't dance, I'm just blocked. And then Dana would respond with something like, that's wonderful. What does it feel like to be blocked? And what does a block move like? What does that block sound like? And this ties into what I was saying before. There's actually nothing in the way. Whatever it is that's showing up is the process.
Exactly.
Give people a direct experience of this was one of the transformational parts of that whole exploration.
Exactly. I love that reminder. It's a process that I often do with our clients, that somatic experience of what's alive, and just to be a block as you describe it. It's just like, and to be stuck and to move in that rigid way and to be pushing and to be constrained, just to feel that in every muscle in your body and to work with that and to move that allows the freedom to just come through, right?
Yeah.
Such a powerful practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how it can be expressed in art, because we you know, as artists and creatives, it's very easy to take take weeks, months, years creating something, whereas it can just be expressed in a matter of moments if it's real and authentic and unfiltered. And yeah, I mean, when I see that from friends, like I had a man that we both know in my arms in the river yesterday. We went for a cold dip, and he'd had an emotional experience, and he was just crying in my arms, and we're just sitting naked in the river together, and just being able to hold him through that without any thoughts of trying to fix him, without any judgment or need to change the experience. And how can we encourage men to have, you know, more of these experiences, whether it's through what you just described, through the transformational art, or whether it's with other men?
I mean, there's countless ways you can do it. But the main thing that I'll share is that it's a practice, because we've learned to be the way that we currently are. And so there's a deconstruction process of the patterns and the programs that we have learned, that we have adopted. And so this is the value of engaging in something like a men's group, or adopting a feeling practice, or a transformative art practice, or going to ecstatic dance, or just making time throughout the day to sound. Like, I'm really curious about how many people do this in their lives, because I do this in my life where, and this isn't something that I intend, but when I'm alone and I'm feeling a really intense emotion, I will make sounds. You know, like if really uncomfortable experience of like shame happened to me, and then I'm by myself, I'll like cringe my face, and I'll be like, and I'll organically start moving into, fuck, oh my God, and I'll just start making sounds. When I'm around other people, I rarely do that. There's an inhibition there. There's a regulation there, you know? And so just making that some kind of dedicated practice of being with yourself first, so that you can practice feeling and expressing, and then seeking out and finding groups where that's encouraged and supported, so that you can bring the relational aspect into that exploration. That's what's going to start opening things up, because it can be really hard to be in a group and to be invited into sharing something that feels incredibly vulnerable and threatening. That can be a big leap for a lot of people, especially when there's so much evidence that they can draw upon in their own life experience that's telling them it's not safe to do that.
Right.
So the starting point is always with yourself first, so that you can familiarize yourself with that process. You can come into contact with feelings without it being something super intense. You know, like, don't wait until you're triggered out of your mind to try to start going into a feeling. You know, sit down for 2 to 5 minutes and just feel your body when you wake up in the morning or before you go to sleep at night, so that you can come back into contact with sensation. That's always the starting point. And then everything starts to unfold from there organically. You don't have to try or push or force anything. Your system knows how to heal itself when it's not being held in place. So this is what I would say to that. Make it some kind of daily practice to feel your feelings, and then seek out environments, groups, training programs, supports, environments where that's encouraged, welcome, and held in a good way, so that you can start practicing doing that around other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, because it really starts with that deconstruction and that expression of what wants to be expressed. And let's face it, guys, if we're not expressing these emotions at home on our own, then they're going to come out in other manipulative, toxic, unhealthy ways. You know, we're gonna snap at the driver who cuts us up and go ballistic. We're gonna, you know, be pissed off with the lady at the checkout for going so slow. We're gonna take it out on our partner. You know, this is what's happening in society, is it's all being bottled up and it's not being expressed. Whereas literally, as Deus says, it can be expressed in, you know, 1 to 2 minutes, even just to really go into that shame, or go into that frustration or exhaustion or procrastination or anger, whatever it is.
A couple other thoughts on that is that this is also true with the quote unquote positive feelings as well. Now, how often do people suppress or repress their joy and their excitement and their pleasure, because that could be embarrassing or shameful? You know, so this is why turning it into a practice, regardless of what's going on in your world, is so important, because there's a whole spectrum of feeling that is available to us. The heights and the depths of feeling that we are capable of is just unimaginable to the average person who is so desensitized to the magnitude of feeling that we're capable of. But that level of intensity is really hard to manage when the threshold, the window of tolerance, is so small. And that's what's happened in so many people. You just put them into a chronic state of stress, and then the threshold for intensity, anything that falls outside the window of what is tolerable, overwhelms the system or plummets them into collapse. We have to start expanding the container of our threshold of feeling, which is why it has to be a practice, and why I'm saying don't wait until you're triggered to do this, because if you're triggered, you're already overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's already hijacking the entire system. And if you suppress one feeling, you suppress all feelings, because what you're doing is suppressing your capacity to feel. It's not just one emotion you're pushing down, you're pushing down your capacity to feel across the board. So to titrate this opening through a regular practice expands your capacity to feel joy and excitement and pleasure and all of the things that we're really yearning for. It's all connected.
Oh my God, yeah. And I'm so glad that you included all those emotions that we suppress as well. It's like, you know, when I hear you talking there, Deus, it's like these societal norms are like the walls closing in and compressing our emotional capacity and our feeling state. And as you say, we must expand our containers and our vessels so that we can experience the vastness of all these emotions that, as humans, you know, it's one of our greatest gifts. Yet so many of us are walking through life completely numb or even flatlining. So yeah,
it's a big process. The other thing I wanted to mention, just so that it is noted, is it is possible to transmute an emotion or a feeling without going into the full intensity of expression. These are the internalized processes of working with consciousness directly. This ties into the science of yoga. This also ties into accelerated evolution methods, which is actually going inside and connecting with the full intensity of a feeling, but you're not transitioning into expression. You're actually just working with the energy itself.
Mm.
But one of the caveats that I want to say with that is most people who think they're transmuting an emotion in reality are just suppressing it.
Right.
It takes a tremendous amount of skill to be able to transmute a feeling internally successfully. And that takes a lot of practice, and that is hinged upon your capacity to feel fully. So it's the same feeling practice. It's just what kind of methodology are you utilizing to work with that energy? And one of the benefits of allowing expression, like I was saying before, is that starts to dissolve the fears, the inhibitions, and the blockages around expression that actually limit our capability to connect with others authentically. So there's multiple benefits of working with it externally in that way. The benefit of working with it internally is you become self-sufficient in your ability to be with the full intensity of experience without relying upon some sort of external container to hold you through that. But that, I would say, that's more of an advanced practice, not because it's superior, but because it relies upon a certain amount of capacity to feel and navigate and direct energies, which is the result of a lot of practice.
Exactly. Yeah, the result of a lot of practice, and really, we just want to anchor that the practice is what allows you to deconstruct those old ways of being, or the resistance to feeling the vastness of your emotions. So yeah, be in the practice, guys, and yeah, just keep it simple. Just start one practice, whether it's just expressing your emotion, whatever's alive, for 1 to 2 minutes a day. If you don't have a private space, do it in the shower, do it in the car, do it outside, go for a hike, whatever, wherever you can. And then just layer it and build it up, because then, as Deus says, the more you do that, the more you're going to be able to actually feel the energy and the sensations in your body. And then you can move it to that next level of transmutation. So I'd really like to talk about integration, because this was a major missing piece of the puzzle for me, as I was trying to heal myself. I mean, I did God knows how many self-development courses and programs through the years. I must have spent, I don't know, 150 grand on courses and programs, and I never got what I have got in the last couple of years due to the nonsense that's going on in the world, for which I am incredibly grateful, because it gave me what I was always looking for, and that was integration. So what's your experience of integration, and how can you describe that to the men, and how they can really integrate those shadow sides?
Well, when you said that everything that's happening in the world right now led to your integration, what do you mean by that?
I'm glad you asked. It really made me look at those shadows. I had no other choice, because they were being triggered over and over and over again, multiple times a day, until that dark secret cave just overflowed into my life, and I had no other choice but to look at what was in there. And I don't think that would have happened if we hadn't had this craziness going on.
Okay, so I would define integration in a slightly different way. So what I'm hearing from you is that what's going on in the world helped to bring to the surface certain aspects of your being that you wouldn't have been able to access otherwise, so that it could be processed.
Exactly. It brought it out into the open, so that it could be processed, it could be understood, it could be expressed, it could be acknowledged, which was part of the integration process. And that internal turmoil or fight was over. It was dissipating. And that was a big part of the integration process and moving more into wholeness.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to throw some concepts out here, and maybe I'll just preface it by saying, in no way is this true. I'm just putting languaging around it to be able to talk about specific components of this process that you're bringing up. So in experiences like what's going on in the world, or again, plant medicine ceremony is the easiest reference point because it's so visible and it's a very intense but very short-lived container so that you can actually see this process in real time. But what I hear you talking about is activation and discharge. So it's an activation of a charge that has been lying dormant in the system. So trigger activates that, brings it up to the surface to be seen and felt fully.
Yeah.
And then discharge occurs as that is felt fully, because it's allowed to actually move through the system so that it's no longer being held.
Right.
So how I would speak about integration is slightly different, because what you're talking about is going into and processing a feeling. So for me, integration actually occurs after that experience.
After the discharge.
Exactly, because after the activation, all you're doing is surrendering deeper and deeper into allowing that feeling to be there and move through the system. So this is a process of softening into intensity. And there's a lot of healing that can occur there, but integration has to take place following that experience, because you're restructuring your whole system. Right. You're recapitulating your physical, mental, emotional, energetic body. And then there's a kind of like a orientation process that takes place after that, where your system is recalibrating to the newness. Now that it's no longer holding on to that weight, holding on to that energy, how does it move now? How does it interact now? Maybe there's a recovery process that takes place after that experience. This is the integration component, as I would speak about it. So using these definitions, integration, there's basically two components to it. One is passive. It doesn't require anything from you. It's like if you're going through a detox process. Mm-hmm. There's nothing you need to do. It's your system just naturally releasing toxins and replenishing nutrients. All you really need to do is take really good care of yourself during that process, making sure you're getting enough rest, making sure you're staying hydrated, getting some basic physical activity, doing some self-care. That's your responsibility, is just really nurturing your system so that it can do what it does best, which is recalibrate and come back to homeostasis. But there's also an active component of integration. And this is something that a lot of people miss, especially in regards to plant medicine ceremonies. And this active component requires your participation. Mm-hmm. And it basically has a few steps. The first is to harvest the realization from that experience. So what are you more conscious of now? What have you learned from that experience? You actually harvest the realization, the insight that has been generated from that experience. You need to identify it to make it conscious. And then if you want, you can carve out some detail there. Like, what is good for me about this realization? What's good for others as a result of me having this realization? Why is it valuable? You know, you can really kind of carve out some detail so there's greater breadth and depth to the realization. But really, it's the important part is identifying what it is. What have you learned? What's the insight? And then the next step is to transition that into a practical action step. And it needs to be specific. This is really important. Like if somebody comes out of an experience and they're like, wow, I just need to love people more. And oh my God, my heart has been so closed. I'm going to be more authentic in my relationships. And it's like, okay, great. What's one specific thing you're going to do to live that more fully? And the person is like, I'm going to be more present with people. That's great. You're going to forget. What is one specific way you will be more present with people? Maybe it's you're going to make eye contact with a person. Or when you meet somebody new, you're going to repeat their name 5 times in your mind so that you can remember them. You know, it's important for the mind to grab onto something specific, something actionable, because what integration is on this active side is the transition of turning a realization, which is theoretical, into an actualization, which is embodied and lived. And that doesn't happen without deliberate effort. And you need to be able to identify a specific so that you can actually track its implementation. So you have the passive aspect of integration, which is just nurturing your system so that it can recalibrate. And then there's the active component, harvesting the realization, making it conscious, and then implementing it so it becomes lived. That's how your life actually transformed. If you don't do that, then chances are you will fall back into pre-established patterns because you are not consciously implementing something new. You are relying on the pre-patterned behavior, which is what you're trying to shift. So that's what integration is, transition of realization into actualization. So it becomes embodied and it becomes lived. And that is how you generate wisdom. It's turning something that is known intellectually and you embody it. That's what wisdom is.
So powerful. It's such an incredible distinction for all the listeners and men out there, because, you know, what Deus is talking about is you're stepping into a new way of being. And unless you anchor those realizations, and just hearing you describe this comprehensively and articulately as you always do, it's one of your greatest skills. It's really supported me to get those extra components of the realization process, so that I can anchor those realizations and insights of my experience over the last 2 years and really, bring energy to them, and then consciously create practices, specific practices that actually anchor that new way of being or that new frequency.
Yeah. And it doesn't even need to be complicated. Like, I can't even think of how many times I've had a client come out of this profound experience and we go through this integration process. And the thing that they realize is that they need to take deeper breaths,
right?
Or or something like, I need to move my body more, or like, I need to reach out to my mom and tell her that I love her. It's like very, very simple things that have profound implications on how we are moving through the world. And that process of releasing the things that have prevented that, making it conscious, and then living it. That is the transformation. The magnitude of the action step doesn't matter at all. It just matters that you're implementing the thing that you have now realized. That's where the transformation occurs. And that's how you change the pattern program. It's how you change the belief system. It's how you change the entire psycho-emotional system.
And that's how you bring a new world into existence, a new possibility, a new way of being, a new relationship.
Yeah.
So powerful.
And so simple.
That's right. I know. Everything.
That's a lot of words for something so simple.
That's true. That is true. Oh. And what are your final words on, resolving all of this so that, our hearts as men can be more open again, and we can soften and just come into more loving contact with others? I
think in closing, one of the things that I've witnessed a lot in men's work is men trying to amplify some kind of warrior energy. Like they need to push or force or grow and constantly push the boundaries of intensity in order to reclaim their masculine self. And I think while there's a lot of value there, I think that's actually part of the programming we've received, and that there is a tremendous amount of value that can be found for men and women, everybody, but men in particular, because generally we're more emotionally desensitized than women, is to come back into a nurturing, patient, loving relationship with ourselves. Some of the most powerful qualities for myself, for others that I've been in contact with along this journey, has been contemplating forgiveness and patience in this process of opening back up to feeling. No pushing, no forcing, a relaxing into what is true, and knowing that you've never done anything wrong. You've just learned how to cope. And as you understand that, forgiveness naturally arises for the ways that you've been, for the things that have happened to you. And as you learn how to surrender to the intelligence of your system, knowing that there's no way to speed up that intelligent process, that is the most efficient way to resolve energy, to surrender to the innate intelligence of your system, then naturally patience starts arising. And so as you engage in this journey, wherever you're at and whatever it is that you're facing, learning how to be gentle with yourself and to contemplate forgiveness and have patience with the process will actually speed everything up and turn it into an opening rather than a hardening, which can sometimes happen as men try to be more manly.
I feel so embodied just listening to that gentle, forgiving, yeah. Yeah. I feel the force evaporated in that moment. What a beautiful, beautiful moment to end on. And for our men out there, our brothers, how can they connect with you and find out more about your offerings?
So my personal offerings, you can learn about those at deusfortier.com, deusfortier.com. I do one-on-one coaching. I also have a masterclass for men that runs every 3 months or so. And I also do breathwork sessions. And then in terms of group facilitation, specifically around plant medicine, I often work with my partner, Aga, in those spaces, and you can find all our upcoming offerings at thesomaheart.com, the Soma, S-O-M-A, heart.com.
Excellent. And we'll drop those links in the description of the podcast for you guys. And I just want to take this moment to thank and acknowledge you for being here, brothers, and listening to this conscious conversation. And yeah, I just invite you to be with everything that you've heard in this podcast, and just take a moment to yourself to really absorb the resonance and the vibration and the frequency that has been delivered, because you've been guided here for a special purpose. And if you feel like this resonated with you, share this with as many men as you can. Keep spreading the light, keep connecting yourself with other men, be a part of a physical men's group in your location. If you don't have one in your location, reach out to Deus or I, and we will provide you with a blueprint so that you can create one. Let's join men and gather men of all races, all religions from around the world, so that we can unite as one and dissolve any competition and unhealthy sexuality and masculinity, so that we can be whole and complete and be the guardians, be the shepherds of this incredible planet we live on. Thank you, Brother Deus.
Thanks so much for having me, Silver. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to spend some time with you like this.
It's an absolute pleasure as always. Let's do it again.
Mm-hmm.